Thanks so much for coming along. It is my very great pleasure to introduce Katherine Savoie. And she is the co-founder of Charity Entrepreneurship, which is a startup incubator for EA charities. It provides training, seed funding, and the other things necessary to kickstart an effective nonprofit. It also is the give well for what organisers... Sorry, I'm stumbling on this. For what organisations to start rather than fund, doing extensive research to identify interventions where there's a gap that are cost-effective and evidence-based. It's funded by the Open Philanthropy Project and has helped multiple high-impact charities get started, including 2 which have been awarded GiveWell incubation grants. Katherine also co-founded Charity Science Outreach, which is a meta-organisation that raised $9 counterfactual dollars for high-impact charities for every dollar spent. It's a pretty cool ratio. Subsequently, she co-founded Charity Science Health, a direct poverty charity that has received multiple grants from GiveWell and has served hundreds of thousands of families in India. So before we let Katherine teach us about how to start an effective charity, just want to remind you, we would love your questions. There's hopefully going to be quite a bit of question time, so please use the app to ask questions for Katherine. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Katherine, for the lovely introduction. So I'm going to start by telling you a story about a co-founder I know when they just started a charity. And at the beginning, everything was really exciting. They had so much autonomy in their job. Every day, they got to do something that they thought was important. They weren't listening to a manager and doing something that they thought was not that important. They got to do what they thought was actually helping people every day. They weren't marketing Fruit Loops or making rich people even richer. They were doing something that was really meaningful. And that felt amazing. And every day, they got to work on something new. Because when you run a charity, you have to wear many different hats, especially at the beginning. One day you're managing, another day it's strategy, sometimes you're doing site visits, and sometimes you're designing a study. And because of doing all those things, which makes every day very interesting, they also grew a lot. Every day they had to learn something new. So as the time went on, they became knowledgeable about so many different things. And as an EA, obviously, they really enjoyed that aspect that every day they were learning something. And they also got to have a lot of flexibility. So they could work at an office if they felt like it, but they could also work remotely while traveling to different countries. They could work from a desk or a couch or standing desk, whatever you wanted. And that was really amazing too. And they actually got to work with people they liked. You don't get stuck in an organization where you're working with that person where you're like, ugh. They were building their own teams. So they got to make sure that the people were both competent and somebody they got along with. They thought, this is a dream job. How did I get paid to do this? Somebody must have made a mistake. And then there's the downs. There's ups and downs in starting a charity, and they learned so many different things. They say, if you're making mistakes, you're learning. They learned a lot. So one of the things that they learned is that when you're running an organization, you have a completely different way of thinking about things. You're used to thinking that if you want to do something, you have to do it yourself. You have to think, okay, well, what skills can I build? But when you're running an organization, you're not working for it. You're working on it. So often what you'll do is you'll hire somebody who has those skills. If you don't know how to program, you hire a programmer. And so they went way too slow at the beginning. Another thing they did, an obstacle they ran into, was conflicting views. So they'd go and they'd ask expert A. They're saying, oh, what do you think about this project X that I'm doing? And the expert would say, oh, that's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Whatever you do, don't do it. It's suicide. Don't. And then they go, okay, fine. They go talk to another expert they really respect. And the expert would say, wow, that's amazing. How do I support you? And they're thinking, this is so confusing. I respect both these guys, and they're giving me completely different things. They go and try X, like the first expert said, and it fails. And they get publicly criticized. And they're thinking, oh, this sucks. Okay, so they try not X, and they still get publicly criticized by the same people. And they're just like, what? I can't win. And so they had to deal with this complete ambiguity, and that was really hard. You might be wondering who I'm talking about, and you might be thinking it's me. And you're right, it was me. But it's basically every founder I've ever talked to. It's been GiveWell top charities. It's been people who've come out of our program. Doesn't matter the cause area. It could be animals, poverty, far future. There's always going to be huge ups and huge downs while starting a charity, but it's so worth it. It is one of the most meaningful jobs you can pursue, and it's extremely high impact. And that's why at Charity Entrepreneurship, we're trying to make it easier for people to get into this career path. And try and be the people that we wish we had had when we started, so that you guys don't have to make the same mistakes that we did. And that's the cool thing about being a human, is that we don't have to touch the fire ourselves to know that it's going to burn us. We can learn from other people's experiences. So in this talk, I'm going to cover the 5 main ingredients that go into starting an effective charity, and then how charity entrepreneurship helps with that. So a quick overview of what the ingredients are. So first off is the right idea. Second is being the right person to start it, finding the right co-founder, having a good network, and then of course, funding. To start off with the idea, the reason why I put this as the first ingredient is because it is where the bulk of your impact comes from. To illustrate this point, there is an actual charity called Homeopaths Without Borders. It's like Doctors Without Borders, but with homeopathy. And, you know, I'm sure they're lovely people who are running this, but they could be the most competent, smart people who are executing their organization flawlessly, and they're still going to have no impact because, you know, it doesn't work. And, and they could actually be making the world a worse place because they could be kicking out evidence-based medicine in favor of water, basically. Another problem with ideas is that even though hopefully nobody in this room is thinking of starting something like Homeopaths Without Borders, that the way ideas are usually chosen is a bit haphazard. So you're just going about your day, you know, you're listening to a podcast, reading an article, and all of a sudden you have an idea. You're like, oh, this is great. And you compare that one idea to the status quo. So usually that's continuing your education or the job you're currently in. But there are thousands of ideas out there. The odds that the one that you thought of is the highest impact one is very, very low. And that's where charity entrepreneurship comes in. So we do GiveWell style research to figure out what charity to start instead of what charity to donate to. We put in thousands and thousands of hours comparing a whole bunch of different ideas, dozens and dozens. And we have a whole research team run by my wicked smart co-founder, Carolina Sarek, who's in charge of research. And we have a super systematic approach to figuring out what's cost-effective, what's evidence-based, scalable, and of course, where there's a gap, where there could be a good charity to start. You can find out more about our process on our website, charityentrepreneurship.com. Just check out the blog, and then there's like a list where we categorize everything. You can also watch my co-founder's talk. She's going to be giving a talk at EAG London in a few weeks, and it'll be recorded, so you can watch it there, or also on our website. And you can come into our program with different ideas. We do accept those. However, you have to make a very compelling case that it's of a similar caliber. So you have to show that it's similarly cost-effective and evidence-based because we're wanting to support people who want to start very high-impact charities. It has happened in the past, so it is possible, but you do have to do your research beforehand. You can't just come and say, hey, I thought about this idea last week. What do you think? The next ingredient is the right person. So when most people think about an entrepreneur, they have somebody very particular in mind. They think of somebody who's, you know, extroverted and charismatic and a little bit quirky. And those people do start charities, but there's a huge range of personality types that go into entrepreneurship. In fact, sometimes the best entrepreneurs are the more quiet, bookish sorts who are really good at decision-making and actually getting things done. And so there's a lot of different ways, different sorts of people, and different skills and traits that you can develop to be an entrepreneur. And if you want to learn more about that specifically, my other co-founder, Joy Savoie, he gave a talk at EAG London last year. It's up on our website where it talks about all the different kind of traits that you need, skills, background, and everything. So if you're more interested in whether you're a fit or not, do check that out, and it goes into a lot more detail. And so in this talk, I'm only going to cover 2 of the traits that are quite important, which is open-mindedness and grit. Open-mindedness is really important because even if you have the best idea in the world and you execute it flawlessly, you could just get unlucky. You know, you could have 10 randomized control trials on your specific invention in the specific country that you're implementing, and society's just changed and it's no longer relevant. So you have to be able to take in that information that you're getting from the world and adjust accordingly. So either can make small adjustments, problem solve around it. You can also do a really big pivot and work on a very different intervention, or you can shut the charity down entirely. This last one is super hard. To think that all of your blood, sweat, and tears amounted to nothing, it hurts a lot, which is why you need grit, which is basically persevering even if things are really hard. This is ridiculously important because you will run into obstacles, guaranteed. And you need to be able to self-motivate and push yourself through that and learn to rest when you want to quit. The way we help with open-mindedness is that we help you set up a system so that you can get real information back. So not information that's just telling you a very comfortable lie that, yes, everything's working, but something that could actually show if it's working or not. And the broad concept of this is monitoring and evaluation. If you're familiar with the charity world, you've probably heard this before, and it's M&E for short. And basically, we teach you how to set up systems where you can find out whether the intermediate metrics are happening. So are people signing up to your program? Are people changing their actions? Are you actually reaching these people that you want to reach? And then we also teach you how to do evaluation. So how do you design a study to see whether your ultimate metrics have been achieved? Are you actually improving lives? Are you actually preventing suffering? And then you can know if it's not working. And you want to know that. You don't want to waste your life on something that isn't actually helping people. And then on the flip side, much easier to accept is you can find out that it is working and be really excited and think, oh, I can go to Givell with this or ACE with this, and this might be really, really good. Another thing, and this is not something that charity entrepreneurship does per se, but it's something I really want to remind people of, is that when people think of failing at an organization, they think you might have in your imagination that, a whole bunch of people pointing and laughing at you, and, people think you're incompetent and bad and stuff. And that's really not what happens, especially in the EA movement. We're really lucky to be in a movement where people recognize that a null result is just as exciting as a positive result. If you come back and you did the expected value calculation, and you said, okay, there's only a 5% chance that this will work, but if it does, it'll be amazing. And you tell people that, and then it comes back and it turns out you're in the 95% that didn't work. People will applaud you for having the intellectual integrity to admit that and change, and then also share it with the world so that other people don't have to make the same mistakes. So we're really lucky to be in a community that is very rational about this sort of stuff. On the grit side of things, we help by our incubation program runs about 2 months in person, and we're teaching you all these things. And we don't just kick you out at the end and hope you fly. We provide ongoing mentorship and support. So once a week, we'll talk with you and give you consulting and mentorship, help you get through those times so that you're not just on your own and thinking, oh, this is the worst. And then also, we have the community of the other graduates from the program. And so when you're talking to them, you can say, hey, oh, this week is terrible. And they can say, yeah, I was there last week. It's okay, it gets better. The next ingredient is finding the right co-founder. This is a super important thing to have. They are critical for you to be able to succeed, and they're going to be one of the most important people on your team. They're going to balance out your weaknesses. They're going to help you carry the load. They're going to be the people you bounce ideas off of. And I think even more important than those straight-up skills that they provide is the psychological support of knowing that you're not alone, that you're with somebody else in this. So when you're going through the dark nights of the soul, it's not just you. And I'm thinking of this one example of somebody who had just started a charity, and the first 3 experts they talked to were super negative. And it was really hard, but there was somebody there to help them get through it. And then it was really nice because then they went to a conference, and they not only got to meet their heroes in the movement and talk as equals because they were another founder of an organization, which was really exciting because otherwise these people probably wouldn't have even talked to them, and they were able to talk to them, have a full dinner with them and everything. Not only that, but one of their heroes actually offered to support their charity financially. So that was pretty darn exciting. And having somebody else there who understands how big that is, because if you go talk to your parents, you're like, wow, Peter Singer really liked what I did. And they're like, Peter who? And you're like, it wasn't Peter Singer, just for the record, but somebody like that. And another charity that I know when they were started, they're trying to influence corporations and try and make them make changes. And they had been running for almost a year with no effect whatsoever. And they're really getting nervous. They're like, we only have a year and a half's worth of funding, and we haven't done anything yet. This is really scary. And then they got one. And it was amazing. And they went to their family, and they're like, hey, I got this organization to make this weird, obscure change. And they're like, oh, honey, congratulations. And you're like, like, this is so big. So having somebody who can share the successes and the lows is really, really important. And the way we help with this is we have a 2-month in-person incubation program where we take all the potential entrepreneurs together and put them in a single space. And it's an amazing energy to be there because you're basically surrounded by this really cool community of really altruistic, like-minded people all together. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of charity entrepreneurship is that 2-month program. And what we do is we set you up so that you can do a group project with every single one of the other potential entrepreneurs to see how you work together doing an actual project as opposed to just talking, because you can really like talking with somebody, but that doesn't mean that you'll be good at working with them. And we also do a bit of matchmaking for co-founders, so we'll help you find and set up with people who have a complementary skill set. So for example, one really common one is we'll take the stereotypical, extroverted, charismatic person, but who might not be as good at decision-making, and pair them with somebody who has a really analytical, kind of mathy approach to things, who can make sure to steer on course. And often they're the people who actually get things done instead of just talking about getting things done. Another common pairing that we have is we have a lot of people who have just finished school, they have no on-the-ground experience, but they have tons of experience with EA. They're really good at thinking like an EA, they have tons of theoretical knowledge, and we'll pair them with somebody who has on-the-ground experience, but who might have less of that theoretical background. The next ingredient we have is the network. So even if you are the perfect person to start something, and you have built a great team, and you have a great co-founder, you're still part of an overall network. And who you know does make a huge difference in terms of how successful you are. It's an unfortunate reality, but there you go. And we'll help you connect with the EA community at large, which is an amazing community to be a part of in terms of starting a charity. There's just so much talent, so much funding, so many good ideas out there that it really helps to have. We'll set you up as well with our charity entrepreneurship community. So this is the community that's come out of our organization, which is smaller but very densely filled with quite high talent people. And we'll also teach you how to network in the particular field that you get into. So say, you're working in India, or you're working specifically with fish. We'll help you learn how to build that network. You often think that you need that network beforehand to start, but it's actually, especially with charities, it's really like we're all on the same page. We're all trying, well, not on the same page, but we're all trying to do the same thing and help people. So it's not that hard to go into a field and build up a network from there. And the last ingredient is enough funding. This is the thing that most people are the most nervous about, and you really don't have to be. I'm not saying that it's a walk in the park, it's not crazy simple, but it's a lot less scary than you think it is. For one thing, the EA movement is quite funding heavy right now. There's a lot of people who want to give, and there's less opportunities that they're excited about to give. So fundraising from the EA community might be a lot less hard than you expect. Another thing to keep in mind is that feelings do not necessarily track reality. Sometimes they do, for sure, but a lot of times if you feel in danger, that does not mean that you are in danger. And a lot of times if you take a step back and think about, and this is not for everybody, but for a lot of people, if you take a step back and think, what would happen if it didn't work? You actually have a lot more safety nets than you think. So for one thing, if you're starting a charity, probably you're high enough talent that you will be able to get a job. And also, sleeping on a couch for a little bit is not really that big of a hardship. On a different note, if you want to live a great life, you have to do things that scare you. And it's a lot like climbing Mount Everest. If you climb Mount Everest, some days are gonna suck. Everything's gonna hurt, and you're just like thinking, why did I do this? But you knew that going in. There's a reason why it's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it, and then it's not a great accomplishment. And you do it because there's nothing like that feeling when you get to the top of the mountain, and that satisfaction and joy that you have from that. And starting a charity is way better than climbing Mount Everest. You climbed a mountain, whatever. When you start a charity, you're doing something really meaningful. You're doing something that really makes a difference in the world. It's like there are people who are dying from terrible diseases, animals living in inhumane conditions, the future of life is at stake. And when you're looking at stuff like that, a little bit of financial uncertainty seems worth it. On a more pragmatic note, we also give seed grants. So if you get through our program, or you get into our program, which is quite a selective process, at the end of it, we will give you a grant at the beginning so that you don't have to fundraise right away. We'll also set you up to meet potential donors. We'll have a demo day where you can meet donors and also potential hires, and we'll set you up with the network and everything. Also on a side note, the program is completely free if you get in. We'll cover flights, we'll cover the teaching, room and board while you're there. Everything's covered as long as you get in. So in summary, we do 2 months of training in person where we teach you all the ins and outs, get you all the skills that you need to be able to get off the ground. I mean, it will be a continuous process of learning after the fact, but we'll give you that little jump start. It's free. We'll set you up with a vetted partner. We'll set you up with a vetted idea and seed funding. And we give ongoing support and provide a network. If you're interested in this, how do you apply? So first off, sign up to our newsletter. It's being passed around right now, and it'll also be at the door at the end of the talk. This is where we announce when we're accepting applications. And you can also go to our website, charityentrepreneurship.com, and click the apply button. You can sign up there, or charityentrepreneurship.com/apply. We also offer internships. This is a really great way to get a little bit of a taste of charity startups, as well as learning a bit and getting to know us. About 30% of the people who go through our internship program go on to get into the program and start something. And that's out of all of our interns. A lot of our interns are just wanting to have some impact now, and they don't really want to start a charity. So the actual percentage of people who want to start a charity, who get an internship and go on to start it, is actually higher. And the way the internships work is we need a minimum of 5 to 10 hours a week. So you can often do that in the middle of school or if you have a job. And they're usually remote and unpaid. Although if you can't do it otherwise, we will pay, give you a salary or a stipend. And we also do it locally. Right now we're based in London, although that might change in the future. And yeah, so look into that. If you're uncertain about whether you'd be a good fit or not, err on the side of applying. And the reason for this is a lot of things. So for one thing, imposter syndrome is rampant in the A community. So you might think like, oh, I'm totally not good enough, and you might be amazing. And just in general, once again, feelings do not necessarily reflect reality. So if you feel like you're not a good fit, that doesn't necessarily mean you aren't. And we're just the worst judge of characters of ourselves. And our job is to help filter people. And we have a lot of experience with this. So you can see applying as kind of a third-party, impartial evaluation of whether you'd be a good fit or not. Now, if you get in, that's a really good sign that you are a good fit. If you don't get in, that doesn't necessarily mean you aren't a good fit. It could be you just need to build up some more skills, or it could be that, we just didn't want the idea that you were doing or anything like that. And also, sometimes often a characteristic of the best entrepreneur is they do things even if the rest of society says no. So I won't stop you. And the last thing is, actually before I finish, another thing is if you want to support charity entrepreneurship generally, even if you don't want to start something yourself, or even if you do, one thing that I do is I do remote talks to local groups. So I'll Skype in, I'll give a presentation, and then there's Q&A and everything. So if you want to help us out and you want there to be more high impact charities out there, do contact me, and I can help arrange that and everything. And just in general, reach out to me. So if you have questions, if you're not sure if you can do that time next year, so the program's in July and August of next year, or if you're not sure if you're a good fit, you just want to learn more, reach out to me. I have my contact details on the next slide. That's what I'm here for. This is my whole job, is to help you guys create something great. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the next AMF or Humane League of the A movement. Thank you. There we go.
Awesome. But while we wait, I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Yeah.
What kind of charities or ideas would you be really excited about starting?
Oh, for sure. So are you thinking like the ideas that people might come with, or are you thinking?
Or like the ideas perhaps that you already have through your research?
Yeah, for sure. So right now, the one I'm most excited about is doing food fortification for chicken feed. So basically most egg-laying hens, they're laying eggs at way too fast a pace, so they end up getting osteoporosis. And some crazy percentage of birds just have broken bones at all times. So they're just living with a chronic untreated broken bone. And it's not as visible when you're looking at like a factory farm photo. Like you can't see the broken bone, but it's causing immense constant pain. And it's really easy to fix. You just have to put like this tiny amount of calcium into the feed, and then they just don't get the broken bones. And so it's a huge improvement. It costs basically no money. And there's really a lot of room for just a charity to go in there and be like, hey, like we'll pay the $20 a month it takes for your chickens to not suffer constantly. And so that's the one I'm most excited about in the animal sphere. In the poverty sphere, I think all of our ideas got taken up this year. So we're just gonna have to wait till next year. So our research team is generating more ideas.
Great, thanks. That's actually a really interesting and exciting. I have to talk to you about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. What's the toughest lesson you've learned in your journey in setting up charity entrepreneurship so far?
The toughest one? That's a good question. I mean, I covered it a bit. Is basically that idea of being able to keep going when things aren't working. I've had so many things not work, and it's really hard. And basically, you have very much that Facebook effect of all the charities. They don't tell you about all the things that they went through. They just put on their website, like, look, we did this and that. And they also exaggerate it to all hell. So often you think it's like they've saved 1 billion people, and you're like, wait a second, that can't be right. So just recognizing that and being able to see that. Another one that's like really common, that's very hard to detect, so it's very hard to rectify, is that you know your intervention the best. And so you know all of the flaws with it. You know exactly all the ways it could fail, and you don't know how the other things could fail. So often when you're running a charity, you think, oh, this is terrible. Look at that other intervention. Clearly it's better. And then you go to that one. It's like grass is greener on the other side. And then you find out, oh, hey, actually it has this flaw and that flaw. And then you kind of just keep leapfrogging to different ideas and just recognizing that even if you don't know the flaws of other interventions, they definitely are there. And you need to be able to stick with that one thing for long enough to see if it's actually working.
Great. Okay, so another question. What kinds of experience will a good charity entrepreneur have?
Good question. So it depends on what the area of weakness you might have is. So two common ones I see are not having enough experience doing self-initiated projects with no oversight. So most people, if you go to school or a job, you have somebody telling you what to do, and you have this accountability outside of yourself. And working without that it's a skill. I actually think that the education system is really annoying because I think that it just like makes your muscles atrophy in that sense of you just never get the chance to actually start projects on your own and lead them, and the only thing holding you accountable is yourself. And so what I would recommend is if you haven't had experience doing that, is go out and do it. So you can either pick a project that you think is high impact, and it could be a small one, like you don't have to start a charity to start a charity, but just doing some small project in your local community where you see a way you want the world to change, and you go out and you do it. So you can build a team, you can set up a plan, and you're the only one holding yourself accountable. You can also do like a good kind of litmus test, and this is something more common that people do, is they go find an online course that they're just interested in, and they finish it. And there's nobody telling them not to do it or to do it, right? There's no you can drop out whenever, there's no cost. But being able to do that is like a really good kind of micro step towards being able to be self-directed. The other thing I often see is people have lots of experience or are really excited about entrepreneurship, but they don't have a very strong EA background. And I think that if you want to maximize impact, there's nothing quite so good as reading a whole bunch of the EA literature. You can be lucky, like some organizations clearly have started high impact charities without any EA knowledge, but that's just a virtue of there's a million charities out there. Most of the charities that are recommended by GiveWell are not really EA minded at all, they were just really lucky. And so if you really want to start a good charity, there's tons of super important information out there in the EA space. On top of that, you can also look at information in the nonprofit space just generally, or the entrepreneurship space, because EAs tend to be a bit light on that, but there's tons. It's not like we're the first people running charities here. There's a lot of information out there that we can learn from. So kind of those three things: EA knowledge, nonprofit general knowledge, and then, what was the third one actually?
Projects.
Yes,
like
self-initiated.
projects.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, can you apply for the program with absolutely no ideas?
Absolutely. No, half the people who applied have no ideas. We mostly really encourage people to join if they want to start one of our recommended ideas, just because they've been so vetted and everything that you're very likely to have a high impact with that. So that's often very common. People will often come in with a cause area in particular, but a lot of people also are open to all the cause areas. We're also doing mental health this year, so all of our previous stuff was poverty and animals, but we're also hoping to make it so that there's some more actionable things people can do in mental health and EA.
Great. So what are your thoughts on when to start a charity versus when you could work with an already established charity?
So if you can start a charity, if you have that skill set, which is like not terribly common, you should definitely do that instead of working for a charity, because you're going to have so much more counterfactual impact. Because if you're working for a charity, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the counterfactual argument that somebody else, if you don't work there, somebody else will work there, and they'll hopefully be slightly less talented than you. Hopefully the people hiring have some sort of vetting process. So the counterfactual impact you're having is much smaller than if you start something, because if you start something, it really wouldn't have existed without you. I mean, there is the argument that it'll get started eventually, so it's not pure counterfactuals, but counterfactuals kill everything, so they're a real bummer. So, so you definitely should for that. If you're feeling really nervous about it, I mean, you're always going to feel nervous, so I wouldn't use that as a filtering mechanism or a decision-making rule. But if you're really too scared to do it now, then you could go and work for a nonprofit and kind of build up your confidence and everything. So that could be good. But yeah, if you're choosing between those and you think you could do charity entrepreneurship, I definitely recommend it.
Great. So would charity entrepreneurship consider providing recommendations for other cause areas such as AI and the long-term future?
So we've actually been told by other AI people that we shouldn't. Yeah, they thought that if we did it, there was more chance that we could do more harm than good. On top of that, I'm not convinced by far future arguments, so I would have done it from an epistemic humility perspective of, well, there's these smart, altruistic people who have similar values to me who believe this, so even if I'm not convinced, I should give that some weight. But and that's a relatively weak argument, and if I'm also not buying it and they tell me not to, I'm not going to. So, yeah.
Okay. So next question, how did you formulate the program and where did you draw inspiration for the model?
Good question. So the story behind how we started it is, so we had originally been a meta organization at Cherry Science Outreach. Then we were told by GiveWell that they really wanted actually to have more ideas. So we actually are more direct charities. So we went and we started one. So we researched a whole bunch of different ideas. We prioritized them. We picked the one we thought was best, but we published our runner-ups just in case and for transparency's sake. And we didn't think anything would come of it. But then a few months later, we got a person approaching us saying, hey, like, I love your ideas. I want to start one of them, but I'm really nervous. Oh, what do I do? And so we gave him a whole bunch of mentorship and consulting. We gave them a seed grant, and they ended up starting a great charity. And we're like, oh, that was a lot easier than starting ourselves. How do we scale that? And thus charity entrepreneurship was born. And so that was kind of the reasoning behind it. In terms of, so we have been inspired a lot by Y Combinator, which is a really famous startup accelerator, but in the for-profit space in terms of providing training and everything. We also just made up a lot of it, as entrepreneurs do. So there's a lot of that. In terms of the content itself, it's just, we've had tons of time to think about this. We're talking about it all the time. We'd already written a lot of stuff, just trying to share lessons learned. So that was relatively straightforward. And actually, one of our earliest cause areas was education reform. So we have lots of opinions about how to educate people. So that turned out to be handy, fortunately. Yeah.
That's great. A minority of ideas for charitable enterprises are totally unique. How do you assist entrepreneurs deal with the competition aspect?
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Do you want to clarify?
Yeah.
Was that your question, Neil? I don't know.
Yeah, look, it's just asking that question about, like, in a number of sectors within social enterprise, it is fairly crowded. So people might have an idea that they can do it better, or And there's a sense of competition, because you're competing for the same donation dollar or interest from donors. So yeah, how do you, does that ever come up? Sounds like it might not have, but how do you help people with the competitive element when they're starting up a new charity?
Okay, so there's basically competitiveness and crowdedness. So on the crowdedness side of things, I feel like a very easy thing to get stuck in is idea that we're much more important and big than we actually are. The EA movement's very tiny. And also even the charity sector is very tiny. And we often kind of get in this thing where we're like, oh, well, there's this one charity already doing this thing. Like, why do we need another? And that would kind of be like saying like, oh, there's one orphanage in Europe. We're done, it's good. I was like, well, there's a lot more. We need way more than that. And so, even a great charity, say Give Directly or something, they're only working in a handful of countries. There's tons of other countries. I'm not saying we start another unconditional cash transfer charity. They're really great. I'm not saying that. But there usually is huge gaps where there's an idea that we've already researched, there's tons of evidence for it, and it's only happening in a handful of countries. In terms of competitiveness, a really cool thing about the charity sector is that, yeah, we are all we're trying to pull in the same direction, and people are super nice. Oh, I'm so spoiled. Like, I only talk to charity entrepreneurs, and everybody's super nice and competent. And so I remember when we were researching what charities start for Charity Science Health, and I would go up to a food fortification charity who's doing like iron fortification in India. And I'd say to them, I'm thinking of making a food fortification charity in India. What do you think? And they're like, sure, yeah, great, do it. Here's everything we've learned so far. And they just share everything because they're just nice people who care about it. And so I'm sure that there are some people in the charity sector who are more cutthroat and stuff, but it really does filter for super sweeties. So that's nice. And I do think, on the other hand as well, that having this competition does make the charity sector better. I do think that if we're both competing for the same funding, funders are it's definitely not an efficient market in the charity sector. So it is mostly going to filter for people who are much more good at fundraising as opposed to who are good at making a difference. But I still do think having that element of competition where you know that somebody else is doing it as well will force you to push yourself harder.
So wouldn't we then also look to scale existing charities rather than start up new ones?
So that's a very good point. So I do think that's the case if they're already quite effective. So, but I do think that if you have this EA mindset, you often end up having much more cost-effective charities, even if there already are ones. So if we look at the Against Malaria Foundation, there's a lot of charities giving out bed nets. But the Against Malaria Foundation is actually really focused on being cost-effective and efficient. And they are actually often 5 or 10 times more cost-effective than other people doing exactly the same intervention. And that's a huge difference, right? And it's often much, much larger. So lots of charities are working kind of in the same area, and they are doing, say, food fortification of food in India, but they're doing a million other things which are terrible. They're also doing, like homeopathy and all sorts of stuff. I actually just talked to my doctor the other day, and he said that he had a charity in India. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I do too. Like, what are the odds? and he's like, it's an Ayurvedic homeopathic thing. And I was like, aren't you my doctor? This is really anyways, that's totally an aside. So anyways, charities will often be doing one good thing, but a whole bunch of lower impact things. And it's, there's this idea called fungibility. Okay, so how do I explain this? So if you give, actually, I'm not going to explain it. Look up fungibility. I won't do a good job of it. But even if you try and donate to the specific intervention, that's good, but they're doing a whole bunch of other things, it kind of just bumps out the money that they would have spent on that good thing, and then they spend more on the thing that you don't think is high impact. So it's really hard to do that. It's also really hard to influence existing charities. They're kind of more stuck in their ways, right? And also, they have different values and epistemology for yourself. They come to correct answers in a different way. Like a lot of people, like here, we might be really attached to reason and science, but a lot of people, they're like, yeah, reason and science is cool, but what about my heart? What about my gut? Other various organs? I don't know. So it can be hard to change them to those things because you're not maximizing the same things they are.
Okay, time for one last question, which is kind of related. If there are organisations that are value-aligned EA organisations, would you fund them to be more effective? So something that, or help them be more effective, something like helping with logistics, marketing, or performance?
So we don't do that just because we're really trying to specialize in charity entrepreneurship specifically. That could definitely be something that people could start a charity in, perhaps, come through our program and go start that. We are considering, and it's been on the back burner for a while, so we might do it, is not just making recommendations for what charities to start, but also what programs that existing charities should launch. Because if you go and approach charities and say, hey, this is what you should do, there's massive resistance. But if you wait for people to come to you and ask you for advice, that's often a lot more effective. So we're considering that, but that's not quite what they're referring to, I don't think.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much, Katherine, for that really inspiring talk. So the sign-up sheet for the mailing list is doing the rounds, so please put your name down for that. Katherine's also got office hours at 4 p.m. today, so harangue her with questions about whether you might be a good fit for the entrepreneurship program. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful talk.